Peter Parker's watching Aunt May fade away in a hospital, but he's ready to hunt down Tony Stark because he blames him for her being in this condition. Tony had manipulated Peter into revealing his secret identity to the world. Pete saw all of the heinous shit that Tony was doing during the Civil War. He defected from Team Iron Man, and him, MJ, and Aunt May had to go on the run. Eventually, Kingpin hired an assassin to take Peter out, but the bullet misses him. He ends up finding his poor Aunt May. Because he's illegally operating as a superhero, they couldn't use May's real name, which means they couldn't use her insurance, and the money that they had to keep her in the hospital had been ran dry. Due to all this, the doctor sadly informs Pete that they're going to have to move May to some charity ward where she will spend her final moments. Pete's hell-bent on saving May's life. He's just trying to buy her more time, so in order to do this, he heads off to find somebody with a bottomless checkbook. But as he's trying to break into Stark Tower, he finds out the security there is quick as hell. After Iron Man tackles Pete and is flying him through the city, Pete quickly webs up his repulsor boots, sending the two of them crashing into the ground. Tony's gloves were able to slow their fall enough to where it didn't kill both of them, but he wants to know if Peter's completely lost his fucking mind. But the bad news is, Peter pretty much has. With his repulsors overheated, Tony reverts all of his power to his unibeam in his chest, and as he goes to hit Pete, Spidey decides in a last-ditch attempt he's going to try and empty out his new organic webbing and see what it does. And to his surprise, he had a lot more in there than he would have ever imagined. Tony's telling Peter that this isn't going to work, that he's still going to arrest him, but Pete just tells Tony to shut up. He doesn't. Pete punches him in the chest and tells him to shut up again. He rips the helmet off his suit and tells Tony to look at him like a man, eye to eye. He gets in Tony's face and screams that Aunt May is dying and it's all his fault. He tells Tony that he trusted him, that he was like a father to him, that when he said the only choice was to reveal his identity to the world, he believed him. Above all, Tony swore that Aunt May and MJ would be safe, and now she's laying in a hospital bed dying. Tony apologizes for the situation. Pete tells him he doesn't want his pity. He wants him to do something about it. He tells Tony May needs the best care that money can buy, because he's not going to let her die. He's just simply not going to let it happen. Pete tells Tony he's going to buy her that time, and Tony cuts him off and says, or what? You're in no position to make any threats. But Spidey tells him it wasn't a threat. The or was letting Aunt May die in some charity ward. Stark admits that that's not what he wants. His repulsors come back online and he breaks free from Pete's webbing. He tells Pete any direct help he could give would just be aiding and abetting a criminal. It would completely undermine everything that Stark has done with the Superhero Registration Act. Tony tells Pete that the stakes are bigger than you or I, or even Aunt May. When he flies off, he tells Peter he's going to let him escape this time, out of respect for May, so that Pete can be there in her final moments. Next time, he's taking Peter in one way or the other. Pete hits his knees and screams in frustration as he runs over and punches a hole in Stark's helmet. Tony flies back home to Stark Tower. He walks into the kitchen and sees an old picture. A picture of him, Pete, MJ, Aunt May, and all the heroes living there in Avengers Tower. He remembers the good times, the times before the Civil War broke out and all of this bullshit started. He asks Jarvis if he can do him a favor. Back at the hospital, we see Jarvis showing up to Pete and MJ's side, where he tells the doctors that he's got a check for $2 million. As they take Jarvis back to accounting, the doctor assures Pete with all of this money, May is going to get the best and most comfortable care so that she can finally pass in peace. Now, Pete's not hearing any of this as the doctor tries to reason with him and tell him at her age, in her condition, there's no bouncing back from this. Pete tells him maybe not in your world, Doc, but in the world I live in, I'll find somebody. Find somebody is exactly what Pete does. And knowing no doctor of medicine can fix her, he heads to a doctor of magic instead. Strange tells Peter from what he understands, there's nothing that anybody can do, but Pete simply tells him that she's not going to die. Stephen tries to remind him that we're all going to die, but Peter says yeah, but not like this. Spidey says if it was of old age or of something natural, he could live with this, but she's dying because of him. It was a bullet meant to take his life. If she goes now, it will be all his fault. Trying to be of any service that he can, the Sorcerer Supreme offers Spidey the hands of the dead. He defies space and time in his astral form and allows Spider-Man to break himself up and simultaneously seek the help of everyone he could. He goes to the Night Nurse, Hank Pym, Hank McCoy, Reed Richards, and hell, even Dr. Doom, but they all give him the same answer. There's nothing anyone can do, and Aunt May's going to die. Exhausted, Peter's ready to walk away, and Strange offers him some advice, not as the Sorcerer Supreme, but as a doctor. He tells Pete that no matter how badly injured her body is, Aunt May's spirit is still inside, and she can hear everyone around her. He says we all die, Pete, even those we love the most. Can't change that. All we can control is whether or not the ones we love the most die alone. He tells Peter to stop blaming himself for the inevitable, but instead go savor every last moment of love you have with May, because that's the greatest gift you can give her right now. Out of options and out of ideas, Pete sits outside in the rain, completely defeated, when all of a sudden a strange red bird flies by. And as Pete chases it and rounds the corner in desperation, he's stopped by a small girl who tells him that Dr. Strange may have not been able to help him, but she can. They head down the path, and she tries to tell Peter what his real problem is. Too selfish and self-involved, and he thinks his pain is the center of the universe. Now the girl runs away out of sight, and as Pete's looking for her, he runs into a very different but familiar man. As they talk, he finds this man is wrapped up in books and fantasy and video games because he never got the moment in his life to feel like a real hero. Almost in a hazy fever dream, Pete's then offered a ride to get where he's going by a millionaire. And even though he's much older, the same as before, this man is extremely familiar. He tells Pete how relentlessly bullied he was in high school and how it caused him to hate everybody around him. He dove into his work of the sciences and became one of the richest people you could find. And one way or the other, all of those bullies that used to pick on him in high school eventually ended up working for him. But he tells Pete that none of that really matters because all he ever wanted was a beautiful girl he met in school, and he's lost her. He's then greeted by a strange woman who tells him he has just met other versions of himself. All these mind games and fever dreams turn out to be the work of none other than Mephisto. He offers Peter help and says that he can do what no one else can, and Pete guesses that he wants his soul. And Mephisto tells him no, that's so played out. Mephisto stopped taking souls of people like Pete long ago. They end up spending an eternity in hell, but they suffer righteously and nobly, knowing that they saved somebody else's life. Mephisto says there's just no fun in that. He leads Pete back to a motel. It turns out he's having a similar conversation with Mary Jane. He tells Peter what he really wants is to rob him of his joy, his happiness, the thing that brings him comfort when he's in his deepest, darkest moments. He wants to take his love, and he wants to take their marriage. He gives the two one more day to make their decision and tells them at midnight he will either lose his Aunt May or his marriage. They're using their last hours to make their decision, and MJ wonders if she's being selfish when she says that May's lived a good life. A life full of love and happiness, and Pete kept her going every step along the way. Peter's done more than anyone could hope to do, but what if this is just her time? Pete tells her that she's not saying anything he hasn't thought already. At the end of the day, he feels that he would be responsible for May's death. The knowledge of knowing that he was the reason she died, that he was the one that killed her, would break him in two. Now, MJ's sobbing, knowing that if she doesn't take this deal, she's responsible for Peter breaking himself in two. Peter assures her he's not, that if they make the decision together, that somehow he could live with himself. They spend the rest of their time, the rest of the day, hours and hours, just holding each other. She tells Peter that she remembers every little detail of them being together, and no matter what happens, no one could ever take that from her. With the time approaching, Mephisto shows up and explains how this deal is going to work. Pulling their marriage apart, they're just slightly changing history. MJ points out that this still isn't going to solve the problem. Pete's identity is still public. May would still be in danger. Mephisto then explains to her that her and Peter's love is the rarest love of all. It's pure, it's unconditional, and it's made holy in the eyes of the person that Mephisto hates the most. Love like theirs only comes around once in a millennia, and to rob him of that, Mephisto will do anything to make it happen. Mephisto says if that's all it takes, consider it done. As the clock is striking midnight, MJ says the answer is yes, you monster. Screaming through tears, Pete confirms it with Mephisto and says do it. Now that the deal has been made, Mephisto reveals a little secret from earlier, that little red-headed girl that first led Peter down this path was actually his and MJ's daughter. A daughter that will now never exist because he chose Aunt May's life over hers. And in their last moment through tears, MJ tells Peter that she knows they were meant to be together, that no matter what, in her heart of hearts, she knows they will find their way back to each other. She tells him that God, the devil, nobody's going to be able to stop that. As they share one last kiss, entire marriage, two souls joined, two lives shared, the good times and the bad times, all the laughter and tears, and all the small moments in between that they shared through the years is gone. Peter Parker wakes up the next morning in his Aunt May's house to his alarm clock going off with no memory of what happened. He runs downstairs and kisses his Aunt May, thanking her for breakfast but telling her that he's going to be late. As he rushes out the door and jumps on his bike and heads off to start a brand new day.